And hopefully we're live now on Vaughan TV as well. And as soon as I see that, I know there's a few seconds delay, but there we go. Look at us, live on Vaughan TV. Welcome everyone to another exciting edition of the Magic Sandwich Show, number 112, if such figures are to be believed, which there's good reason for them not to be. Anyway, welcome everyone. This is particularly exciting and also very, very frightening experience for me because I'm hopefully broadcasting both live on Vaughan TV, welcome everyone to Vaughan, and also simultaneously live onto YouTube. And as it takes about a minute and a half or so for YouTube to catch up, we're going to have to wait. I know that Concordance, who's kindly joined us for this show, is keeping an eye on YouTube, so he'll let me know hopefully whether things are working. Welcome also to Hogtie Champ, and hopefully for the second hour we will be joined by Ozzy, but he can't make it for the first hour. So welcome gentlemen. Concordance, it's been a while. Where have you been?
Working. No, I've been very busy. Lots going on. Traveled quite a bit over the last few weeks. Gave a series of seminars in various places across the country. Checked in with some of my team from work. And when I'm home, I try to pack in all the family time. So I have to make tough choices with my time sometimes. But some of the topics you guys covered weren't really things I had a whole lot to say anyway. How did the last one go with the MRA activists?
Well, I actually wanted to go back the one before that, if I may, which I think you would have been a great contributor to, which was the two Phils. We had Professor Phil Moriarty and Phil Thunderfoot talking about women in science, amongst other things. And you know, let's pick up on that a bit. I don't know whether you saw the show or sort of like kept up with the news about the comments by the Nobel Prize winner. And I think I called him Tom. I think it's Tim Hunt.
Hunt, yeah.
Yeah. What did you follow that? What did you make of that?
I did. I think they're both talking past each other half the time. I probably would have had a hard time agreeing with Thunderfoot on a lot of things because most of my mentors through my scientific career were women. Not necessarily nice women, but women who were incredibly intelligent, major thought leaders in their fields. And the idea that there's a deficiency in women that prevents them from doing good science is so counterfactual to my experiences that I would have a really hard time finding common ground on that. So maybe it's best I wasn't there.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know what I still don't know what to make of that show. I don't know whether I'm happy with it or I thought it was a little bit too aggressive. The after show I thought had a completely different sort of feel to it. The two Phils went as soon as they started talking about science. There was sort of like harmony and whatever between them. But I thought the first was perhaps a little too aggressive on both sides. I don't know. What did you make of it, Hogtie? I've not actually talked to you about that. You might have to unmute yourself.
I unmuted the broadcast and not my own. It seemed to me they were bringing in a bit of baggage from, I don't know if they had previous conversations or what the story was there, but I know in particular Philip Moriarty came in with some observations about some other writing that Thunderfoot's done. He has great respect for him as a scientist, but he seemed to have real passion for Thunderfoot's mouth, I guess, and I mean, Moriarty even said some critical things about Thunderfoot being evasive by not using his real name on the internet, which I found really amusing. being in the same room with the two of them with Hogtie Champ written under my name. But yeah, that's a good point. They did seem to, once they started talking about the science, they did seem to sort of to move past all that stuff. But before that, anytime science came up, it was almost like a saber rattling move. Like, oh, you need to prove this empirically. You call yourself a scientist, and yet you're making these claims about what women are like, and you can't prove it. And then the other guy would say, but you can't prove the opposite. And it was just like, are you kidding me? Like, we could have Nephilim Free in the room for that. I'm insulting both those guys by saying that now, but it was just interesting watching the two guys that are that bright and that successful in their fields get that passionate and emotional about a topic that you think would be subject to some sort of empirical assessment, but often seems to be overridden by the social issues that get around it. So,
I was aware from previous conversations with Professor Moriarty that he wasn't too happy with some of the things that Thunderfoot had said and published on his YouTube channel, but I had no idea that he was going to be so outspoken in his initial comments, and as Ozzy described, he was really up for a fight with Thunderfoot, and that came as somewhat as a surprise to me, and I don't know. That's why I still have questions about it. I've got a huge regard for both of them, obviously. But
and then how hard is it to drag? And then how hard is it to drag Thunderfoot into a fight? Now I'm going to share this with the audience, just sort of a behind the scenes thing that the audience is. We are, aside from the feed that we all share with you, there's also a Skype call that we participate in, and Thunderfoot was initially not on the show, and then when Professor Moriarty had said somewhat offhandedly and yet clearly with some forethought, had said, "Oh, and by the way, I don't agree." It was just like an obiter in the middle of a sentence. He's like, "Oh, by the way, there's a lot of things that Thunderfoot says that I don't think really help science either." Like, it was totally off topic, but clearly premeditated to some extent. Moments after that, we, as a group, received a Skype message from Thunderfoot saying, "So, you think I should join?" And no, we were sitting here thinking, yeah, well, that could be good or bad. And we got what we got. I mean, the audience got to see how that sort of discussion plays out, warts and all. But yeah, I think both of those gentlemen were quite vigorous to go head to head, face to face, because of obviously some disapproval they've had of each other's comments in the past.
Anyway, let's move on. We've got a few interesting topics hopefully lined up. Before we get there, though, I think we have to offer personal congratulations to Hogtie Champ, and I'm going to let him explain why.
I think you should congratulate my wife more so. Many people on Google Plus know. So I've been away for a good 3 weeks now. Our wedding was planned for last weekend, and there's just always stuff to do in the couple weeks leading up to it. So I've kind of had to quietly excuse myself from the Google Plus community and even from the Magic Sandwich Show while we got ready for this. I haven't said much about getting married for a couple of reasons. One was that I try to not, make this, about personal lives and whatnot. I like talking about the issues, and I think sort of what goes on in my own personal life is kind of no one's business. Most people in the audience know that there's kids living in my house. If it isn't because of the artwork, it's because they often insert themselves into Hangouts or Magic Sandwich Show episodes that I'm doing. The other thing is, initially I was not that excited about it. It's happy, it's a big deal, but in Alberta it's not that big of a deal. You don't have to be, like legally married. You don't have to go to clergy. You don't have to have a ceremony. Basically, once you sign some affidavits declaring yourselves to be a couple, you're good to go. There's really no difference, no practical difference. But yeah, we got to a time. We've been together for some time. We got to a time. So let's go ahead and have this service. So we set it for, as a very unusual service. We set it for a place that required the printing of latitude and longitude on the invitation. This is not a place that people would have been able to find without the aid of GPS. And out in the forest in the east face of the Rockies, absolutely just beautiful time going up there. The thing that I was a little bit, so I'll tell you the parts that I was surprised by, and it was the administrative stuff leading up to it. And this was at a time that the Americans are having this big debate over gay marriage, and they're on same-sex marriage, and they're all on about this. Oh, it's going to ruin America. If they do this, I'm leaving America. I'm going to Canada. Like, that's it. I'm done with America. Not realizing that they don't do their research. People who said stuff like that, because of course Canada, we've had it here for a long time. So for context, I'll have to say that I mean, we don't have fights like that in Canada, for one thing, because we're a little more progressive, but also because in Canada it's very clear in the Constitution that marriage and divorce are in the bailiwick of by Constitution. It's under the control of the federal government. But the solemnization of marriage is under the control of the province. So basically, once the federal government makes a decision about what marriage is, the provinces are kind of bound to follow it. So in Alberta, in the province of Alberta, where we were applying to get married, traditionally Albertans have not supported same-sex marriage. This is a long-standing tradition here. And the previous applications used to have a space for groom and bride. And if you went there and you tried to fill out, two guys' names or two ladies' names, you were just not going to get married. Well, a good 10 years ago, the federal government, through various steps, which we don't need to cover here, we've discussed it on the show before, made it so that, same-sex marriages are permissible. And the province had to rather hurriedly change some of their forms. And they've done it in kind of an ungracious, unromantic way. So I knew when we went to get the marriage application that it was going to permit what people would call this unbiblical marriage, this modern, they're redefining marriage, they're undefining marriage. The form literally says person one, person two. And so long as you put two persons' names on the form, they will process your application. There are, of course, many other conditions that have to be met there. And that's where it gets a little weird, because I learned that not only is this sort of unbiblical marriage permitted in Alberta, which I had known, but in fact, every reasonable form of biblical marriage is actually banned in Alberta. So I had wanted to mention that. Actually, first thing I want to say, I want to tell you that our marriage application was rejected on the first submission. If you're curious why, I'll tell you. We had filled, so there's a bunch of informational parts of it that you fill out.
I'm curious. Can I just say, I see some comments in the Vaughan chat, and also thank you, Fiona, for your Skype message. The fact that I'm quiet, I do not understand. Although you can't see it, I've got my microphone literally inches away from me. So I've put it a little bit closer, and I'm talking into it. It's something that people have mentioned over the last few weeks. I don't know why. I hope that is better. Anyway, yes, I'm interested. Your marriage application was rejected. What dirt did they have on you?
What dirt did they have? Well, it was an admission that we made on the form, which turns out not to be legal. And that was, so they do collect a lot of information on these forms, and there's no way you could ever challenge this in court, because it's already been ruled here that the Division of Vital Statistics has a legitimate secular reason for collecting certain bits of information. So you have to put down what your gender is, you have to put down what your religion is, and the only thing is your application cannot be rejected because of what you write in those spaces, but they can still collect that information. So when asked what our religion is, my wife had filled out the form first, and she'd put down atheist. So when she handed the form to me, I normally put down none. I thought, okay, well, I'm going to put down atheist. May as well put that down on the form. They'll enter it in there. And the form was returned to us rejected with the computer printed reason on it. Application rejected, reason, : atheism is not a religion. So as
good
much
point.
as you hear...
That's actually a really good point.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You hear these Americans will rant on about how, the Supreme Court has ruled that atheism is a religion, which it has not, by the way. The Supreme Court has not ruled that. I've since looked into that case from the 1960s, and that's not at all what they ruled. But this whole thing comes up. Well, who cares that the court ruled this or the court ruled that? I mean, what are we? But I will say, as a matter of law, in the province of Alberta, atheism is not a religion, and two atheists cannot get married here. Now, we had to go back and, of course, say, well, this is a little silly. Like, do we have to sue to get this cleared up? What's going on? And it turns out that there is a code 99, which is your not applicable or none or whatever else. So you can still, two atheists can get married in Alberta, but you cannot declare yourselves to be atheists. You have to ask for the code 99 designation, and then they'll let you get married under those circumstances.
That's an interesting point. So none really is your religion. atheism is more of like a metaphysical statement, right, about nature of the universe. It's not something that has to be observed in some way. How did you feel
Well,
about that?
I was amused terribly because, for one thing, this was just after a whole bunch of videos on YouTube. Again, this researching its head about atheism's a religion, atheism's a religion, and they'll always cite as proof that atheism is a religion is that some court said it, or actually some Christian webpage quoting Conservapedia, misquoting some court finding, says atheism is a religion. And here I've got a computer printed form. Now, the reason I was so amused by it, and I think you make a good point, Concordance, about the metaphysical statement and whatnot. You got to keep in mind that this whole conversation is taking place at what you guys would call the Department of Motor Vehicles, right? Because here we have privatized registries that sort of handle everything. So you do corporate your title searches, corporate searches, getting renewal on your boat trailer, and applying to get married. So you end up having a lot of these, but like, am I going to argue with the lady at the DMV about whether or not atheism is a religion, or whether or not I was hard done by, because now my charter rights, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, my charter rights to apply to be married as an atheist, as a self-described atheist, are now being just trodden upon because But as a matter of law in Alberta, and the rest of Canada, as a matter of fact, Jedi is also not a religion. This is something that's been decided through orders in council. I understand that in the UK they had to change their census forms to include Jedi as a religion because enough people put it on a previous census. But the Canadian various councils across the provinces and the federal ones, but through orders in council, just said, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to call atheism a religion. We're not going to call Jedi a religion. So you cannot get married here if you declare yourself to be something that the government considers a nonsense religion. I think potentially a person could sue for their right to call themselves Jedi or call themselves atheist, but why? Why would you bother? So we pressed on to the more sort of interesting parts of the forums. There are various.
Can I pause you there,
Sure, please.
Hogtie?
Yeah.
I'm looking at Vaughan at the moment, and we've got a problem with the call.
I noticed the video just went all cuckoo.
Yeah.
Still be heard, or?
I don't know. I'm getting a message. Can you not see it on Skype? It says, hold on when we try and get the call back. I suspect we're not being broadcast at the moment.
Well, I just put the microphone, the Vaughan volume back up, and I can hear you and I discussing whether or not we're on the air. It sounds like they can see us, but it's this weird sort of, I want to say Picasso, but that's the wrong artist. We're in sort of pieces on Vaughan, but yeah. No, I think we can still be heard.
Can we?
Yeah, I mean, Quantum saying, yeah, we can see you and hear you, just the boxes are screwed up.
Oh, it looks like Concordance has fallen out of the call.
Oh, that's why, and that's why our boxes went. Yeah, I know that cat came. I have to go like this so that people can. Yeah, the cat came on screen and then.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I don't know. How long does a cat live for? Is it about 12, 14 years? These ones, honestly, yeah. Their lifespan, I think, is going to be substantially shorter than that. I've got the sack, I've got bricks, and I know where the local canal is. Honestly, they're troublesome things. Can we still be heard? Just a quick thumbs up or a yes on Vaughan TV for us. It looks as if we've lost Concordance, but we're still being heard? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we'll wait for Concordance. It's not my fault. For once, it's not my fault. It's Concordance. There we go.
I adore the framing, though. We got one frame for my hairline and one frame for my beard.
I'm not going to change it because I suspect if I do, as soon as I do that, Concordance will come back and we'll have to rejig it. So we're going to stick with some really weird. So if you just put the camera up or down.
Oh yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
But I won't know. Let's try this much, that much. No, I want to go up, don't I? Well, you can see more of the wall of art. Yeah, last time I was on, I did get messages about, is Hogtie trying to grow a beard or what's going on? No, I'm very lazy, and I did shave for the wedding, because my mom was going to be there, and she gets upset about that stuff, and out of respect for my wife, of course. But well, let me say a couple of things about how I came to recognize that biblical marriage is not permitted. So there's a bunch of things. So when you actually go to do the application, there's an affidavit. You have to the elements of which you have to swear to be true, and you have to repeat some of those things at the actual ceremony. We have to say that I know of no legal reason why I can't join into a marriage, and but to make that statement at the wedding, you have to be familiar with what legal reasons would normally prevent somebody from entering into marriage, and you're briefed at the DMV. They will explain to you all the reasons why you're not allowed to get married. So you can't marry your grandmother, you can't marry your own child. I mean, not that the Bible really speaks to those issues. But one thing I was a little surprised by. So so there's your affidavit, and then there's like this declaration that says you have to respect that the province of Alberta is an abuse-free zone, marital abuse-free zone. You're not allowed to psychologically or physically abuse your spouse. And you have to sign this declaration saying that entering into a marriage in Alberta, you understand that that's the spirit of modern marriage in Alberta. So any biblical or Quranic permissions for men to correct or treat their wives in a way that'll help them be better people is actually not permitted here. But I understood that. I was like, okay, so I'm not supposed to beat my wife. I get that. Or let her beat me, I guess was an important thing. But the one line in the declaration that threw me for a loop, and I actually paused before putting pen to paper, because the phrasing of it was so precise, it couldn't possibly mean anything else. And yet I was baffled to see this on a modern marriage license application. And it was that I declare that neither me nor my prospective spouse are the property of the other. Sorry, is the property of the other. I got to use the proper. It was phrased just perfectly. Neither me nor my prospective spouse is the property of the other. And I was baffled by that expression. I went, well, what could that possibly mean? And I would go over it in my head and go, it's so precisely written. It could only mean I don't own her, nor does she own me.
That's the way I would read it. Yeah, but why is it there?
Why is it there? I don't know. I read this. I was just, what are you talking about? So I foolishly asked for, like, that she's looking at me like, okay, well, what's going on? Like, are you going to sign it or not sign it? I was like, what is this? Like, I'm not marrying my slave? Is that what this asks? And she said, well, let me look at the form. Oh, damn it. Now I just opened the door for her to give me her interpretation of what the form means. And I said, no, it's fine. I'll sign it. Then my wife was looking at it and that sort of thing. And it did start a bit of a discussion, but I was totally unaware that in Alberta, you are not allowed to marry a person that you own through any means, through purchase or dowry, or have captured as a slave, perhaps through war or just invading some other country. All of these other things that traditionally here in Alberta, we used to say, well, no, we need traditional marriage. We need biblical marriage here in Alberta. It turns out those things are expressly illegal. You are not allowed to marry your war captive in Alberta. You can't purchase a wife in Alberta. I had no idea that was expressly illegal.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
Well, not for the people who push for biblical marriage.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I have to say, Hogtie, and I am speaking as close as I can to the microphone without actually eating it. You've really sort of like explained and described something which is supposed to be incredibly romantic, the two of you getting married, and it sounds as if it was sort of like just a legal battle. And where's the romance in this? Give us some happy side.
There was some romance. Well, there was one more legal thing, and that is that you do have to declare that you're not legally wed to another person. So the polygamous marriages that you see in the Bible have not ever been permitted in Alberta, and no one here has ever fought for that. So I'd identified in total 4 different biblical types of biblical marriage that are expressly illegal. You don't even get past the application stage. But the wedding itself, the romance, like I say, it was beautiful. We went out to the mountains. I mean, only people who knew us would know how to even find this place. I mean, these are, relatively skilled, outdoorsman people that would be able to go find this place. Our families had a great time. We all look great. The bride didn't show up, but I understand. Like, I know what I'm like. What my kids are like.
I'm gonna see. Before you say anything further that may embarrass you and harm domestic relationships, I'm going to see if I can bring Concordance back into the call, because
Please, yeah.
he should be able to join us anyway, but perhaps he's sitting there thinking, why am I not being brought back in? So let's see. I don't know what this is going to show. Oh, Concordance. Well, he doesn't seem online at the moment.
Huh, how strange. Well, while you fiddle with that, I will say absolutely. I mean, if the audience is all, I don't, for some reason, I'm just not that motivated to talk about my actual personal life, my own emotions. I don't share my feelings with the audience. No, I love my wife very, very, very much. I mean, I am so incredibly lucky to find. I mean, I've always said of marriage that the goal is for men is that you have to find a woman who's compatible crazy. Like if you're looking, I'm gonna be the next Tim Hunt saying something like this, but but if you're gentlemen, if your goal is to look for a woman who isn't crazy, it's an ill-fated mission. You need to find a woman who has compatible crazy with your own weirdness and deficiencies. That is, admit to yourself that you're not hooked up right too, and find somebody who can embrace that and find love in the jackass that you are. I'm very lucky to have been able to do that. And it was things like her sense of humor is great.
The trouble is, if I sort of like take that advice on board and look back on previous relationships, I'm so batshit crazy that I try and find other batshit crazy people, and they're so batshit crazy that we just can't get on. So I think
we
sort of like as general advice, it's maybe not bad, but on a specific level, it has never worked for me.
you and I have talked about this separately offline and on, but you and I could do a whole 2 hour show on the batshit crazy that we've dated in the past. I will say that. I just got lucky and found one who was sort of marginally crazy in the right way. But yeah, no, I've got a long history and a wide swath of just complete loons. Like, let's not get into that.
Yes, let's not. It's such a shame that Concordance has left us, because one of the topics that I wanted to discuss relates to America, probably Texas as well as anywhere. And I don't know whether we should sort of like wait around and fill in time to see if he's going to come back online. There's no explanation. I'm presuming it's a problem at his end, and I'm also assuming that he's going to come back to us. So I'm going to pad out a little bit of time, if I can, with you, Oktay, and off the bat come up with, I don't know, here's a question for you, something that I read about recently. It's just like a quiz question, which I prefer to do to an audience rather than just one person, but hey, you're the only person I've got to deal with.
It's the only time I'll ever win the quiz.
Well, you might win this one. I think it was around 1820s, around that sort of time, where the Oxford University decided that it would put together a dictionary, and it set, I think, about 50 people to create a dictionary, and what is now known as the Oxford University Dictionary, well known throughout the world. They thought that the project would take 5 years. Okay, so after 5 years, they hadn't quite succeeded. What letter of the alphabet, and they did do it in alphabetical order, what letter of the alphabet do you think they'd got to after 5 years?
Oh, after 5 years, they might have made it to G. Maybe, I don't know, G or J in there somewhere.
Wow. It's a pink unicorn. Pink unicorn in the
It's
chat
it really?
has got it right. They hadn't got past A. In fact, I can tell you
Wow.
exactly. I
I
can
am
tell you
surprised by that.
exactly what word they'd got to after 5 years. Does anyone know? Obviously, somebody. Hey, Concordance is back online. Concordance, are you going to be able to join us again? Let me see if I can add him. Hold on. Add people to this call. Concordance is online, so add. Add to call. There we go. Yeah. Does anyone know the word they've got to? Advantage? No. They got a little bit past advantage, and they hadn't got as far as AZ. The word they'd got to was ant. There we go. That was a good fill-in till we got concordance back. There
It
we
is.
go. And everything's
is.
back in order now.
Caught me well off guard. Yeah,
What
caught me
happened,
well off guard.
concordance?
Like that's that.
Did you just do it deliberately?
My computer had kittens.
Did you just
No,
do it
no, my
deliberately
computer just.
because everyone knows there has to be a flaw with the Magic Sandwich Show on the technical side, and I've got my end working perfectly. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, it was like a hard crash. It's never happened on this computer before. Never.
Hard crash. Okay.
So it's infecting my computer now. Your technical problem is infecting my computer.
Okay, I'll take that on board. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Concordance. Now that you're back, I want to talk about certain issues in America, because I hopefully will be over there in September, and also hopefully coming to Texas. Things about America have always worried me, and I know I've talked about this before. Gun control is something that is a huge problem, and I was absolutely delighted to hear the comments of your president, which I can play if you like, about gun control. Should we play that just to show?
No, wait. I'm representing the United States here, so I'm required to say he ain't my president. There you go.
I didn't hear this, so yeah.
Let's have a look at. I hopefully I've got this right. And whilst I try and do this, you can message us on Twitter at the DPR Jones. But let me just clear these away. Hang on a second. I've got so many lined up. Oh, here we go. Right. This is what your president had to say about gun control. I'm so with him.
If you ask me where has been the one area where I feel that I've been most frustrated and most stymied, it is the fact that the United States of America is the one advanced nation on earth in which we do not have sufficient common sense gun safety laws. Even
Yes,
in the face
that's
of
very good. I
people,
like what he's saying there.
mass killing.
Silence. It's
And,
kind of
if you look
postmodern
at
statement on gun
the number
control.
of Americans killed since 9/11.
You forgot to
terrorism,
unmute
it's
Vaughn.
less than 100. If you look at the number that have been killed by gun violence, it's in the tens of thousands. And for us not to be able to resolve that issue has been something that is distressing, but it is not something that I intend to stop working on in the remaining 18 months.
Concordance, I suspect you didn't hear that because you had Vaughan muted. Or
Yeah, I'm afraid to launch it now. I've got it on the other computer there.
Basically, his comments. Well, Hogtie, summarise his comments. There was one specific statistic that I thought was quite interesting, but go on. You do it for me.
Well, you'll have to recall the statistic. I will say, not paying attention. Actually, let me ask you this first: Who was he making that comment to? Was that actually an interview with the BBC, or?
Yes, it was.
It was okay. Well, he was saying that the one sort of frustration, the one area that he felt he had the most difficulty with, I guess the thing he wished he could have changed, was that the United States just never got anywhere with gun control under his presidency. I'm going to put words into his mouth here, but having the examples of Canada and Australia nearby, where around the turn of the millennium, there were significant social revisions and legal revisions to sort of bring down the death toll. The Americans just have not been able to sort of come to that standard in first world countries. In the discussion with Concordance about unmuting the Vaughn feed, which I now realize he didn't even have open because the computer recently crashed. Unfortunately, I missed the statistic, DPR. You might have to repeat what he was saying, something
yes.
about 10,000 something.
He said since 9/11, 100 Americans had been killed by acts of terrorism, whereas tens of thousands had been killed as a result of gun crime in America.
Yep. and we are incapable of doing anything about it. In the same way
Why?
that because of the financial interests of the people who represent that industry. You cannot get a.
I think we've had another crash.
I've lost his audio.
Yeah.
I can
We
still
need
hear
him.
you guys.
Oh, right, there we go. You're back.
Oh, there you go.
Ugh, stupid computer. You cannot get elected unless you're on the very far left in this country. You can't get elected as a moderate or a conservative unless you have the full backing of the NRA. They are ridiculously active, and they are paid by the gun industry, not so much by the owners. The NRA used to be a group who were and supported by the little guy, by gun owners who wanted to make sure that the gun policies that were in place made sense. And now they are literally an industry lobbying group, and they will spend as much money as it is possible to spend to.
It's not my fault. This is concordance. It's not my fault. I've done nothing wrong. For once.
He's the only American here. I think he's just being evasive.
I have no idea, guys. I'm getting notifications that my bandwidth is bad, which is crazy. I'm going to turn my video off. So I'm going to turn my video off and see if that does anything for me.
Okay. I'll do a new screenshot in a second, but do carry on.
Yeah, you'll have to do the screenshot.
Yeah, that's fine.
So
you carry on whilst I do that.
I don't know how much of that you heard, but the NRA to me is principally the problem. But what they're exploiting underneath that is fear of it's a xenophobic impulse that so many Americans live with. They're afraid of what not having a gun would cost them. They're afraid of big government. They're afraid of other races. They're afraid of gun owners, which means fewer people are owning more guns. You've got people who, 10 years ago or 20 years ago might have only had a handgun for in case somebody breaks into their home. Now you've got people who have an AR-15. They dress it up with all sorts of attachments, and they've got a library of guns. And in their heads, maybe they also have squirreled away some, emergency rations and bottled water and a generator. That's their plan for, the government takeover. The kind of xenophobia and paranoia that have become so prevalent feed into that. And the NRA, in every way it possibly can, is funding primarily the Republican Party to make sure that the way media covers events is in a way that sponsors more fear, more risk, so that people run to silver dollars, because that's the other thing they're very big into on the Republican Party, is this idea of gold and silver bullion. And weapons and emergency rations and those kinds of things. This is an American impulse, and I don't see it anywhere else. And it's the more conservative an area it is, it's more like that.
I think that's the interesting point. You don't see it anywhere else. I really am sort of like staggered. I mean, as I say, I'm coming to America, and part of me is frightened, even though I've been there a few times before. I want to show you another video, right? This is just extraordinary. This is a police officer making arrests, and police officers obviously have guns. This is in Texas. I'm going to be going to Texas. I want you to watch this and tell me that I shouldn't be afraid. Hold on, I've got to open up.
And as you do that, I'm gonna repost the link to Vaughn in our Skype chat. Concordance, you'll have to reopen that, and then.
Oh yes, of course.
It's the only way you're going to get the audio is if you have a browser window open with the Vaughn feed, which you'll have to mute and then unmute when the video plays.
Yeah, I just allowing the public to have access to guns is crazy, but allowing this sort of police officer access to a gun, it just tell me what you think.
You okay?
I'm waiting on you. This is your job. I'm waiting on you. What do you want me to
Oh,
say?
you seem very irritated.
I am. I really am. Because I feel like it's crap for what I'm getting a ticket for. I was getting out of your way. You were speeding up, tailing me. So I move over and you stopped me. So yeah, I am a little irritated, but that doesn't stop you from giving me a ticket. So let's continue.
Are you done?
You asked me what was wrong and I told you.
Okay.
So now I'm done, yeah.
Okay. You mind putting out your cigarette, please? Don't mind.
I'm in my car. Why do I have to put out my cigarette?
Well, you can step on out now.
I don't have to step out of my car.
Step out of the car.
Why am I...
Step
No,
out
you
of
don't
the car.
have, no, you don't have the right. You
Step
do not-
out of the car.
You do not have the right to do that.
I do have the right. Now step out or I will remove
I
you.
refuse to talk to you other than to identify myself. and
Step
talk to you.
out or I will remove
I am
you.
getting removed for a failure.
Step
to signal.
out or I will remove you. I'm giving you a lawful order. Get out of the car now or I'm going to
Calling my
remove
lawyer.
you.
And I'm calling my lawyer.
I'm going to yank you out of here.
Okay, you gonna yank me out of my car?
Get out.
Okay. All right.
25.
Let's do this.
Yeah, we're going to.
Yeah. Don't touch me.
Get out of the car.
Don't touch me. I'm not under arrest. You don't have the right to take
You
me out
are
of my
under
car.
arrest.
I'm under arrest for what?
25,
For what?
47 County FM 1098, just
For
north
what?
of 290, send me another unit. Get out of the car.
Another unit, FM 1098.
Get out of the car, now.
Why am I being apprehended? You trying to give me a ticket
I
for your
said get
failure?
out of the car.
Why am I being apprehended? You
I'm
just
giving
opened
you a
my
lawful
car
order.
door. You just
I'm
opened
gonna
my car
drag you
door.
out of here.
So you threatening to drag me out of my own car.
Get out of the car.
And then you
I will
stun
light
me?
you up. Get out,
Wow.
now.
Wow.
Get out of the
Really,
car.
for a failure to signal. You're doing all of this for a
Get
failure
over
to
there.
signal. Right, yeah. Yeah, let's take this to court. Let's do
Go
it.
ahead.
For a failure to signal. Yep, for a failure to signal.
Get off the phone.
On my school.
Get off the
I'm not on
phone.
the phone. I have a right
Put
to
your
record.
phone
This is
down.
my property. This
Put
is
your
my
phone
property.
down.
Sir?
Put your phone down. Right now. Put your phone down.
For a failure to signal, my goodness.
Come over here.
Y'all are interesting.
Come
Very
over here now.
interesting. You feeling good about yourself?
Stand right here.
You feeling good about yourself?
Stand right
For
there.
a failure to signal, you feel real good
Turn
about
around.
yourself, don't you?
Turn around.
You feel good about yourself,
Turn
don't you?
around now.
I don't know what to
Yeah,
say.
it's mortifying. I mean, I say this as someone with many, many relatives who are in police work in some form or fashion. That was inappropriate. I mean, I think if you played it back for that officer, you're going to see his head down. There were things there that were legal and part of his job. If he gives a legal order and he made that distinction, then you're required to comply with a lawful order from a recognized authority by we call it a police officer. You're required to comply. And there are reasons why he wants to control the situation, because if he doesn't, then things can spiral out of control and result in something even worse. But that's still not an excuse for how that was handled. That was completely inappropriate. Are you saying that's something that could only happen in the U.S.?
I'm not saying it can only happen in the US, but I'm just disturbed that it does happen in the US. And just to go back on a few things, comments that he made, such as "I'm going to light you up" when he brought out his taser, I just think that is inappropriate. To say that she was under arrest when she was not under arrest is inappropriate. I think the whole thing is deeply disturbing. And it seems to be, to me, synonymous with the general attitude of police in America, and certainly the reports that we see over here of very belligerent, arrogant attitudes of police officers, particularly in relation to black people.
I think that actually this example is problematic to introduce this. I mean, we were talking about gun control, the general nature about an armed citizenry and what limitations should there be on that. To then introduce the Sandra Bland situation, it's she didn't have a gun, so it's not necessarily a gun control issue. It really speaks to a lot of other issues related to their race relations, related to how police, like what levels of power they have and how they exercise those powers. Just the general climate in the United States. Amongst the races and between the people and their police officers, as far as anything to do with gun control, and that is like it's just like such a heated situation that why then they have guns in the mix and they just simply won't let the guns go. I will make a quick comment on the lawful order business. I see some discussion, even some arguments. Fiona and George Saint seem disagreeing on whether that was a lawful order. My understanding, and don't take this to the bank, is that it's always in your best interest to comply with orders given by the police, because if they're ordering you to do something, assuming you survive the incident, you have recourse, right? If you are going to fight with a police officer, there's a good chance you might end up dead and not be able to exercise whatever recourse you may have. But if they're doing an illegal search, well, then you get a lawyer and you sue them, whatever else. My understanding of what makes the order lawful is that if they say, well, get out of the car, if you say why, they're obliged to say, to give even scant reason why. They can't just tell you to do things. Put out your cigarette, pour your drink on the ground, put your phone back in the car, get out of the car, do this, do a handstand, right? They can't just start ordering you around to do things. But as long as they provide even minimal justification for it, if they say, I need you out of your car because I'm going to search the car, well, now that makes that lawful. This officer was not really skilled at de-escalating a situation. He even threw in several comments that were there to escalate it and made it a lot worse. I don't know.
I think that's
Sandra Bland is going to be debated a lot.
Let me ask you this, Hogtight. Would you expect, or have you ever experienced that sort of behavior from a law enforcement officer in Canada?
Well, we're at the Mounties here, and traditionally, if you don't obey the Mounties, you get a tune-up, like a tune-up on site. The Mounties have very much cleaned up their act. The reason is because everybody respects the Royal Canadian Mounted Police so much that even when in the past, when they would do something that was unlawful or sort of gray area, we'd always look the other way on it because they're the good guys. That has certainly changed in recent years. The other thing that's changed is that Canadians have started shooting at their own police officers. Not nearly on the same scale as the Americans are, but we have some fairly famous deaths. An officer, an Edmonton Police Services officer, was recently killed here in Edmonton, was within the last month. The Mounties don't get killed that often here, but when they do, it's sort of a big deal. But now that people are starting to shoot at police officers in Canada, our interactions with them change quite a bit because now they're more inclined to shoot you. I have been twice arrested incorrectly. Once was a misidentification where they'd ran my plate and had found a warrant issued in my name. It was another person who happens to have my name, and by coincidence also shares my birthday, but different physical description. The police were not inclined to split those hairs on scene, and I was arrested quite aggressively. That situation was dealt with by me just complying with their instructions. And then afterwards telling them, like, no, you guys screwed up. You got the wrong guy. The other situation was a misunderstanding that was my fault. I had taken, I don't want to tell the whole story here, but I had done some things that made it appear that I had just stolen a bunch of stuff and loaded it into a U-Haul and started fleeing across the country. When they found me, it looked like I was committing a pretty serious crime. We had a laugh about it afterwards. But during that interaction with them, they illegally searched a bunch of bags that I had with me. And all I did at the time was I told them, I didn't give you permission to look in those bags. And the one cop says to me, I asked you, you said I could look up front. And I said, no, you asked me where the rental agreement was. I said it's up front in the cab. That's not giving you permission. And that was the end of that conversation. I just went on record as telling them, look, guys, I didn't give you permission to search, but you don't argue with them, right? You can make your point and you listen to their point, but I'm handcuffed the whole time. And like I say, I mean, like any other country, you will get a beating. If you beak off to the cops, you will get a beating.
I'm deeply embarrassed, and I think I owe an apology to the audience that I didn't realise that we had a career criminal on the Pardon of the Magic Sandwich Show.
I told you, it was a mistake. We had a good laugh afterwards. Me and the two.
I mean, your personal experience. Have you had much with the police force of Texas?
I have found them to be invariably polite and professional, but obviously I have a different. They're walking up to my car with an entirely different mindset. Here's where I kind of want to go. I think, why are we different is because we have a legacy of racial tension. I mean, it goes back 100 or more years. I mean, you could say it goes back 300 years. But we've created a kind of urban warfare scenario where cops are constantly afraid of making it's a type 1, type 2 error situation. Are they being hyper vigilant enough? Every time they walk up to a car, there's a possibility that what they're about to face is a life-threatening situation. That makes you, I think, a little hyper vigilant. I think you do that long enough. I think every time you walk up, you watch enough of your friends and colleagues putting their lives in harm's way on a daily basis, you get a soldier mentality, right? We saw the same thing in Afghanistan. We see it everywhere. You put troops in civilian areas. They're a very blunt instrument, and they're on edge all the time, which means they're going to make that sort of type 2 error far too often, which is hyper-vigilance leading to an inappropriately aggressive response. So I think this was bad police work, but I almost think I can find in my mind where that officer was mentally. They were.
I would take. I'm so in agreement with you, up to a point. I do think, and again, this goes back to gun laws in America. I do think that it must be incredibly difficult and a huge pressure situation on approaching any member of the public by a police officer, because they do not know whether that person is going to be holding a gun, a firearm, or whatever, and it could be potentially a lethal situation. I totally agree with that, but the clip that we just saw, that doesn't apply. That cannot apply. That officer, as I think both of you have hinted at, was not sufficiently well trained, or if he was well trained, he forgot his training.
I think that's
he escalated that situation beyond all reason. And I think
we all agree on that, DPR.
Yeah,
I think we would all agree that this is an example of bad policing, specifically for the reason that we're all homing in on, which is he had opportunities to address her concerns, and I think he was probably, hot, tired, pissed off, and he let that bleed through. It was unprofessional.
But I would, as you say, we all agree on that. But what I see of that situation is, it seems to me, I'm reluctant to use the word typical, but it seems that it is not untypical. That is to say,
well, look at the selection bias you're dealing with. You're in the UK watching the news. You're not going to see the 60,000 traffic stops that resulted in a polite exchange between people, or where a cop saved a life. Those don't make the news. So you've got an observer bias in not having seen the opposite effect. I'm not saying that one overrules the other, but if your assumption is based on this very limited biased sampling of what police behavior is truly like, I don't think you're getting the full picture. As I say, I've been pulled over for speeding and failure to signal, and I was pulled over once on my bicycle in college because I ran a red light. I mean, every single time, and again, they're not approaching me in the same way they were approaching this car, but they were polite, professional, and yet not soft, right? They have that same sort of presence that they train them to stay in control of the situation so that it doesn't devolve into something that's life-threatening for them, for the person they've stopped, or for anyone in the environment.
Well,
So
again,
I'm
I have to
You want to see an
apologise.
example?
Pause there. I have to apologise to the audience. I thought we only had hogtie as the criminal, but it appears that concordance is equally criminal. Hogtie.
Yeah. Now, you want to find an example of a polite pullover. This same video clip, 90 seconds before, this police officer had just pulled over a red car with a young woman in it and had a very cordial conversation with her. She'd made a mistake in traffic, and this cop gave her a warning and expressed a number of times, "Hey, I want you to have a good day. This is just a warning. This is your written warning. It's not going to cost you any money, but you need to pay attention to these rules and have yourself a nice day." The guy's sweet as honey. Now, that was a white woman. He pulls over Miss Bland, and she's black. Apparently, she's an activist. I don't know if the cop knew that or not. But yeah, I mean, you want to see examples of good interactions. This guy just had one moments before, and probably many other that day. He was out handing out warnings that day. That was his thing to be doing. I do want to.
I have to put my hands up as well, actually. In this regard, I was a passenger in a car driven by a well-known YouTube atheist, who I won't mention. Sorry, what? And we were pulled up by a police officer for speeding through one of the roads in Utah. And it was quite fun in a way. I'd never been sort of like stopped. I was a passenger, but yeah, he had a gun, and I'm not used to that. And I found that sort of like pretty scary. And he was very good. Very polite, very civil, and I can't fault him at all. But yeah, as I say, I don't know whether it's a cultural thing or something, but to see police officers walking around the street with firearms is something that I'm not used to.
Let me ask you a question.
A funny observation. Go ahead, Concordance, but I do want to share a funny story about the cops with guns. How you get used to it. Go ahead.
Do you feel like people in the UK are less racists? I mean, do you feel like the police officers there have more goodwill in their hearts?
I have a very poor opinion of police officers, and that comes out of 20 years of acting as a criminal barrister.
Yeah.
I do not have a great deal of trust or confidence. I suspect that things have changed over those 20, 25 years, and I do not see as much overt racism and dishonesty amongst the police force as I have done previously.
What I would argue is it's not the people that are different in the U.S. It's the profession and the environment in which that profession operates that requires that they have a different mentality. Where that mentality came from, I think, is something that would be interesting to debate. But in terms of, is it something to be afraid of? You should be as afraid of someone treating you that way as you would anywhere, I think, in the first world, in the developed world. I don't think there's anything special about Texas or the South or whatever. I think racism probably exists across all spectrums to about the same degree. It expresses itself a little bit differently depending on the environment in which it's operating. But I don't think the cries of the South being especially racist are really honestly true. Having traveled extensively around this country and to others, it's been my experience that everyone's kind of racist to the same degree, but expressed in different ways. So the fact that it happens here probably tells more about the history.
Can I ask you to expand on that? When you say it's expressed in different ways, give me an example of what you're referring to.
The groups that people react to differently. even though they may say I'm very progressive, or I'm very, our country is, Canada is so much more progressive, as Hogtie said just a little while ago. That was not my experience. It was sort of anti-Asian sentiments in Toronto that were expressed to me by researchers there, that I found, because research is very Asian to begin with.
And worse for the Aboriginals.
Yeah, and the Aboriginals as well. So the First Nations, and I think, in Oklahoma, there's an anti-Native American sentiment, and the way they're treated is a little different than you might treat them in Alabama, right, where there's a different racist expression as well. So it's these patterns that we all fall into, to some degree or another, and those patterns are different across the country. But the impulse, that xenophobic, paranoid impulse, is constant. It's just how it is expressed in different racist ways towards different groups of people. So I mean that's my perception.
Yeah, I don't want to go too long on this topic, because there's a couple of others that I'm really interested to raise. But again, you may say this is the perception that we receive because I'm watching the BBC. But do you think that there is a legitimate argument that blacks have, that they are, in general, mistreated by the police, or discriminated by the police in the United States generally?
Yes. Oh, I think definitely.
Yeah.
And again, that's
course,
that type 1, type 2 error. And the reason why they're probably, in aggregate, more likely to be arrested for various things is because of that type 1, type 2 error. Cops know that. They're more likely to find something, which is self-fulfilling prophecy, or that person represents more of a threat to them, because statistically that may in fact be true. And it's certainly based on their personal experience, colored through the lens of whatever racial attitudes they grew up with. So, I mean, I don't condone it. This is descriptive, not prescriptive. But I understand the mentality. I understand where that's coming from, and it's arrived at legitimately, as sort of the water in which they swim, the air in which they breathe.
Okay,
That's a heavy line. Hogtie wanted to tell a story.
I know he did, and I'll allow him to do so if he wants to. But there's a couple of other issues I'd love to come to. So, but Hogtie,
it would be out of place now. It would be out of place now. But
right. Okay. In that case, and just to remind people, and I suspect the audience, very much like you and I, are not people who normally tweet. But you can, if you want to, tweet us. I've got the tweet page open. It's at the DPR Jones, and I've got it open. As I say, the reason I have, not just to receive your messages, is because I got a message or tweet from Dougal445 on July the 21st, which I only actually received today when I opened up Twitter. Gentlemen, I think one or both of you may have been present when we had Hamza Tzortzis on the show. Do you remember that? Were you either of you present?
I think I was. I think I stayed quiet most of the time, but I was there.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, and I'm going to play this, we got mentioned. It was, I think, years ago. But in a Radio 4 broadcast on the BBC a week or so ago, we got kind of mentioned. Do I need to explain to anyone what BBC Radio 4 is? Yes?
Yeah, probably. No? Probably.
That would help.
Wouldn't hurt.
I think I know what it is, but yeah.
Okay. Radio 4 is... hang on, I've just lost... There we go. Radio 4... it's radio, it's not TV. It's one of the most respected BBC channels for news and documentaries and the like. And this particular show, and I've just got to minimize that. this particular show was on should extremism be a crime, and the person doing the show was interviewing John Ware is his name. I'll include a link in the video when it goes on YouTube. John Ware investigates plans to counter the activities of those classed as non-violent extremists, blah blah blah. And 34 minutes and 20 something seconds in, this happened. And let me just again, concordance, if you haven't got Vaughan open, you won't be able to hear this. But oh, where have I put it? Hang on. Oh yeah, there we go. This one. There we go. Right.
In some cases, perhaps. On any view, Hamza Tzortzis once met the government's definition of a non-violent extremist. YouTube is a permanent reminder that he used to say beheading was an appropriate punishment for apostasy.
The apostate, if he becomes a political apostate and he fights against the Muslims, then that's described as punishable by death.
They should be stoned to death. Yes?
No, that's not the punishment.
What is the punishment?
Beheading.
Beheading. And you're comfortable with that?
Well, you don't feel any pain with it, that's the first thing.
Tzortzis has since publicly renounced his views on this and other issues.
The thing with the homosexuality thing, the Muslims community have gone a bit crazy.
Did you hear that?
Interesting.
I
love you got him to clarify that.
I can't believe it. On Radio 4, I get featured, kind of, in his interview. I thought that was quite fun.
I wish he'd cited his source, though. Nice to get the promo.
Yeah, well, we'll leave that aside. Anyway, apart from that moment of utter selfish arrogance and whatever, Concordance, as we have you on, and you're a scientist, I want to spend the rest of the show talking about science, if that's okay. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you, and I hope I pre-warned you for this, it's a total shift in topics, but mapping the human genome. And this apparently has been done, and I'm sort of like semi-literate in some sort of science, but human genome and whatever, no, I'm not. But it just struck me that I couldn't understand how you can map the human genome when all humans are different.
What a great question, DPR, and completely unexpected since we didn't talk about this just before the show. Yeah, it's a good point. So I've got a couple of links to this question, personal links. So I was actually in Francis Collins' lab this week at the NIH, and you talk about a police state. Getting to the NIH these days is ridiculous. The security hoops, and they don't even have anything really dangerous there. They're just really worried about people coming and doing something bad on campus, like taking a gun on campus. So we had to check in a dozen different ways, and every building has to be, escorted. But anyway, we were in Francis Collins' lab, which was nothing like I expected. I pictured stainless steel and, tasteful blue lighting and, people wandering to and fro with lighted tables. I just watched Ant-Man, and it made me laugh to think about their picture of what a high-tech R&D lab looks like. Because they're like, there's no instruments anywhere. No one has a coffee cup. Everything's a lighted table with stainless steel and chrome, and that would last about 20 seconds in a real lab. But a very actual low-tech lab. But I also have a little bit of a link because during grad school, worked in a lab adjacent to the Human Genome Project there in Dallas, and spent a lot of time over there. And they were very high tech, but still with dead cockroaches under the machines and that kind of thing. When they initially did the sequencing, they asked for volunteers to be the reference subject for the Human Genome Project. And I think they were looking for initially 10 people, and just round number to see how many they could get through. And they got 6. And I think 6 were, I'm sorry, they got thousands. They got thousands of offers of people to donate enough blood to keep the sequencing operations running for years. They needed someone in good health. They needed someone without any obvious genetic disease. But the initial run sequenced off 6. And the 6 of them were sort of interoperable. It was important that they have multiple reference genomes to cross-compare to make sure that when they were aligning the sequences, okay, short deviation, forgive me, they chop the DNA up, right? They chop the DNA up. This is the Human Genome Project. The Celera project was a little bit different. They used a slightly different method, but they chop it up and then they clone it and then they sequence the clone. And the clone means putting it into bacteria or a yeast artificial chromosome or some form where they can grow up that chunk of DNA they've chopped up. Sure.
Can I pause you there, Concordance, because you're for you it's obviously something you fully understand and whatever, but you seem to have jumped enormously from examining. Can you just sort of like perhaps take it a little bit slower and explain the process of taking the DNA and then this what was the expression you used, mashing it up? It sounds like I don't know. Can you?
You chop it into pieces. So you have 3 billion bases to sequence. And they can sequence between 150 and maybe 400 bases at a time. So you can't just feed material into the sequencer machine. You have to feed tiny little chunks of that 3 billion.
Okay.
Right? So
again,
that's why it was going to take 10
apologize
years.
for interrupting, but I genuinely think that I'm perhaps speaking for the audience as well as myself. How do you go about chopping up the DNA? That's your first starting point, isn't it?
Oh, man.
Am I talking from such a position of ignorance that you don't even understand my question?
No, I mean, I do, but it's not something you really have to know to understand the story.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point of it is, aren't you asking that if people have different sequences, then how can we have a map for those sequences? So it doesn't really matter how we actually sequence it.
Right.
I'm sure the technology of it is fascinating, but the point is, how can we say we have a map of my DNA and Concordance's DNA when we don't have the same DNA? Isn't that the question?
That is the question. But how you?
If you want to imagine, let's use analogy without worrying too much about the molecular biology involved. You want to reconstruct a book, and you sort of chop up all the little pieces, and then you start reassembling those little pieces. Sort of having versions of that book that differ a little bit will still help you put together the chapters. In case some of the little pieces get lost along the way, you can fill in the gaps. Right? Oh God, I'm going to reference Jurassic Park, and they said, "Oh, we're going to use, frog DNA," which totally doesn't make any sense. But the idea is that if you're doing what's called shotgun sequencing, you're throwing a lot of sequences together, or you're doing it chromosome walking. It doesn't matter. I shouldn't have used those terms. Forget it. Forget I said it. It helps to have multiple genomes. So that's why they started with 6 genomes. The intention was not to map the fact that we all have, as you say, different genes. We would say different alleles. That actually came later. They wanted a reference genome, one that represents our species, right? Then they started mapping out all the little variations. And all told, out of 3 billion bases, you've got a total, I think it's last I saw was about 3 million shared variations. That means things that don't make you a mutant, they just make you different from each other. We know that about 3 million different SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, exist in the human population. And the number keeps climbing. The last I saw was 3 million. The time before that, when I was a grad student, we were estimating somewhere around 300,000. So we were off by a factor of 10. Humans are a lot more diverse than we knew. But there's an interest now in mapping out the differences from isolated populations, people in Africa, people in India, people in China, and where do the differences exist? Go ahead.
I think you understand the topic too well. You're actually missing the critical thing that everybody misses when they talk about genes and alleles and mapping the genome. Can I interject?
Yeah, please.
A thing
Please.
that I think will fix it. And I'm gonna say it, and you're just gonna go, well, obviously, but it's not obvious to people. What is a gene? Right? And the problem is that people think about mapping the genome. They think the genome map is ACTTCGA, right? That's a sequence. That's not the map.
I'm really grateful.
So it needs to.
You appreciate my level of ignorance.
Okay, there it is. The problem is a gene is a region or a locus, and at that locus just place, right? So at that place, at that there may be different sequences in there. We may call here's one clue. This is you might be a redneck if you might misunderstand what the word gene means if you've ever used the phrase, "This is the gene for blue eyes. This is the gene for male pattern baldness." You don't have genes for something. A gene is a location, a position in the sequence. The content of what's in that position would be your alleles, your variant sequences that would code for different particular things. This I find very handy. It's the owner's manual for the 2005 either Tahoe or Suburban. Let me just find one here. I was looking for the fuse box thing. Whatever. Everyone's seen one of these books. I thought I'd find the fuse box thing quickly enough. Doesn't matter. Everyone's seen one of these owner's manuals. They're always this weird shape. They're always that thick. If you have, say, a Honda Accord and somebody else has a Honda Prelude, there's going to be a part of that book that describes the fuse block. And it'll be section 8.4, 8-4, for example. So you'll look in the index and say, well, what does a fuse block look like? Well, I'm going to look in the index, fuse block, passenger compartment 8-4, which means go to section 8-4, and that's the page that's going to tell me about the fuse block in my Honda. Well, in the Honda Civic, it's going to have a different description on 8-4. In the Honda Prelude book, it's going to have a different fuse block description at 8-4. But the point is 8-4 is the gene. That's the location in the book where you're going to find what the fuse block looks like. But at that particular page in each different manual, the description is going to be somewhat different because they're slightly different vehicles. Okay, so the gene is the location that tells how we're going to code eye color, right? But what's contained at the gene is going to be different for different people. So that the genome map isn't simply a big long sequence. Rather, it's a mapping out of what genes. So you take all the nucleotide sequences, you break it down into like 25,000 segments, and we say this gene is where we store the information that codes for whatever. This gene over here is the sequence that codes for. It contains the sequence that codes for whatever else. So I think Keebley says it's like an XML file. You know what? There's your short. If you know what an XML file is, DPR, there's your answer. So anyway, does that help concordance? Can I start you with that and say, just if you can tell us what a gene is, that helps explain how we can map out genes, even though, so you and I have the same genetic structure, even though the particular alleles or the particular sequences stored within those gene places are going to be different between you and me.
Yeah.
Does that assist at all?
Well, I mean, well, duh. Yeah, well, duh.
There we go.
So you have 3 billion DNA bases. 3 billion in a haploid. That means, from your mom, from your dad. Yeah. And we were mapping out where the genes are located, but it was also just a map of a reference genome. And that's so important because later on when you find the variations, you know where they go. Because quite often you're finding them in ways that don't tell you a location, they just tell you that there's something different. Anyway, there is a project underway now. The technology used in the 1990s, the type of sequencing they were able to do looks archaic now. I mean, we were looking at 150, 200 bases at a time. So each run took a couple hours, and then at the end of the process, you've only got this tiny short segment. And I routinely now, with what's called next-gen sequencing, that's just what it's called. It'll be called that 10 years from now, I'm sure. I can do a genome in a week, where it took them a little over 10 years. And I can do it for a little over $1,000, maybe $2,000 or $3,000 for good depth of sequencing, where it took them 100 million. So the technology has progressed not just in little incremental improvements, but like a huge leap in technology. So about 5-10 years ago, they launched what they called the 1,000 Genomes Project. So instead of doing one reference genome, and in fact it was actually 6, they're now going to try to sequence 1,000, or I think they finished it now at this point, 1,000 reference genomes from different populations around the world, so that we can look more clearly at the genetic diversity of humans, not just from 6 people who obviously don't represent the entire human race, but from 1,000 people who we now start to get a little bit more representative. If someone, a Laplander from Iceland and Yoruba from Africa, they're going to have a lot of inherited genetic differences. And we don't know how much of it is within that population and how much of it is between the populations, unless we have 10 people from the same region of Africa and 10 people from the same region of Asia, and we can compare how the diversity stacks out. It's the drop in price and the improvement in speed makes it possible now where 1,000 genomes sounds kind of trivial, and we kind of would like to have 100,000 or maybe 1 million genomes. But it's not always necessary to sequence all the DNA, because these alleles, right, these individual variations, these one base differences out of 3 billion, they tend to travel together, because you'll tend to inherit them from your mother, who inherited it from one of her parents, and they sort of stick together with each other. If we've got 3 billion bases and almost 3 million different variations, there's a good chance they're going to land close enough together that they're always going to end up being inherited by the child together at the same status. So we actually only have to test one of those 5 or 6 or 10 different variations, and we already know the identity of the other 10. And that's called haplotyping. So the HapMap project was also launched. We've got all this different stuff that's designed to give us roadmaps, and the ultimate goal is to better understand human biological diversity. And we aren't going to neglect the mouse. We aren't going to neglect all the other interesting species. There are projects underway to do exactly the same thing for lots of other organisms. The cattle genome, for example. The cotton genome is finished. The fruit fly genome, which is not a joke, because the fruit fly is very, very important to us as a genetic model.
There are so many questions that I would like to raise as a result of what you've just said. Excuse me. Hopefully you've got Vaughan open, and if anyone wants to ask a question on Vaughan, please do. And hopefully Hogtie or Concordance will be able to see it. Concordance, I again, and it's my ignorance. I fully accept this. Excuse me, but is the gist of what you're saying, and to draw an analogy, that the human genome we can look at as a book of 26 chapters or so, is it 26? I don't know. And each particular chapter may be generally the same, but there'll be certain words that are different, and that's what sets us apart from each other. Is that a somewhat?
Yeah, that's reasonably true. Yeah.
Okay. So when you map the genome, you're mapping the general gist of the chapters rather than specific words.
Yeah, I mean, the analogies always fall down a little bit on the details, but in general, that's true.
Right. So eye color would perhaps, I don't know, let's take it. Chapter 7, verse 3. That's where you're going to find eye color. Yeah? Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't know whether you're going to be able to answer this, but I've heard sort of like reports that it's possible to introduce sections of DNA into the genome of, I don't know, I presume that's what's behind GM fruits and whatever, but also...
Oh, you're going to make me so happy.
Okay.
Come on, DPR.
Oh, no.
No, I'll
I
call
got
that.
it.
Go on.
I have to put a
Well,
book across
no,
my lap right
my
now.
question is, it seems that this is also something you can do at a very early stage of the embryology of a child. Is that also correct? And if so, how on earth do you... How is that done? I just don't understand.
If only we were all mice, we could cure cancer and all genetic defects, because mice are so convenient. And if you lose one, it's no big deal. It's possible to do manipulation on the genes once you have a good map. That's absolutely true. And the map is required to make sure that you're only putting this new piece of DNA in the right location, because if you put it in the wrong location, now you've got cancer again.
Yep. Okay. So, okay, we're there. So, how
You need the map.
How on earth can you do that? How is it possible on such a microscopic level to be able to do that? I don't understand. Explain.
Well, we don't have to come up with it. Nature came up with it because we often exploit things that pathogens use to alter the way our cells work. For example, and this is where I have to put a book across my lap so you guys can't see, there's a new technology that's very exciting, and it's called gene editing. Okay, that's the general term for it. I tend to use the more specific CRISPR-Cas9 transgenics. But the idea of gene editing is that you can exploit a bacterial protein and engineer it. The point of the bacterial protein is to cut DNA. It uses that as a self-defense mechanism to prevent bacterial viruses of bacteria from infecting the cell. So it's sort of the immune system of a bacteria, and it's an enzyme that cuts in a specific way, and we target that cut particular location with engineering. We synthesize a piece of DNA using chemicals. We tag that on to the cutter protein, and then we inject that, we electrify the cell so that it takes in that combination and it homes to the right location, and then it makes the cut DNA, which has a little bit of stickiness on the ends because it matches the DNA around the sequence we want to modify. I'm sorry, it's so hard to dumb this down because it's a very complicated procedure. And then that new piece of DNA through the repair method is introduced. So now we've taken a piece of DNA, we've shocked it into the cell, we've made cuts around the part we don't want. We slide this new one in and use the enzyme's own repair mechanisms to make it a normal, healthy piece of DNA. You can do this in stem cells, and the subsequent cells grown from those stem cells will all have the modification and will be otherwise completely normal cells. And one of the ways this can be done is called scarless gene editing, meaning it doesn't even leave any kind of visible signs that it's been done. And one of the immediate impacts, I think, on my industry is that the idea of GMO testing is about to become somewhat obsolete. If you can't find the scar, then you can't tell whether something was introduced genetically or was induced through more natural mechanisms like using mutagenizing agents on natural products. But it does have promise for gene therapy if you can deliver these CRISPR gene editing constructs into, egg and sperm, a zygote, basically. When they're at the very small stage, very early on, it's possible to make germline changes. That means germlines means any children that child has will also have the mutation, which is both scary and really a wonderful thing, because we can now correct genetic defects, but there's also the possibility that we could create changes that would propagate through the human population and change what it means to be human. And there are a lot of people that are very concerned about that ability.
I think that this would be a great place for somebody to make a YouTube video that actually explains the processes, because we know that this is one point I really shared DPR's confusion with this. You guys always say, oh yeah, we just insert this sequence into here, or we cleave this sequence here and then energize that and the thing goes in. And I don't understand it. Like, I mean, I understand how a sewing machine works. Is that not weird? But I know with the needle and the little loop and the bobbin and how you have to have two different threads and they go like this. And I get, like, if you ask me, well, how does somebody patch a hole in a pair of jeans? Well, I can explain how a sewing machine makes that stitch work. But you're talking about taking a molecule. You don't just put this stuff into an Erlenmeyer flask and start swirling it around and then, oh, great, well, now we've got a baby that's going to grow wings. Like, this is the confusion. So somebody needs to make a good animated YouTube video that explains to the marginally interested how these genes get inserted or removed or whatever else.
And I'm really, really pleased that Hogtie also shares my sort of like lack of understanding and concordance. I'm going to challenge you to two things. The first is, if you haven't done it already, and if you have, then I apologize for missing it on YouTube. But your first video about why whales do not get more cancer, you set us up for part 2 and you haven't produced it yet. You've got to do that for us.
Okay.
And secondly,
so let me talk about this real quickly,
well,
and then do the
secondly, let me finish my point first. I think that both Hogtie and myself, and I suspect the majority of the audience, would be really interested in the video that that Hogtie's just described. How is it that you actually physically introduce different elements into a genome? That, I think, would be fascinating. Because I've never seen it before, and this is probably why I have absolutely no understanding about it, but I have a desire to understand. Sorry, Concordance, over to you.
So this is a great entree to something that I think Thunder and all you guys would understand. It's the reason why I stay anonymous. The reason I haven't made the second half of the "Whales Get More Cancer" is because some of the things I was going to talk about were also related to work projects. Some groups that are asking these kinds of basic cancer biology questions, and I'm involved in discussions with those groups. And that's sort of what prompted me to make the video. It's one of the most fascinating questions in cancer biology. How is there such a difference? Why is Peto's paradox the way it is? But in talking about that, there's the potential for me to at least give the appearance that I'm taking information from these work meetings and using them for my personal hobby, which is my YouTube channel. And I don't know what impact that would have, but it would certainly be something that someone could use against me, who was angry with me for saying something they disliked and wanted to strike out at me in the real world. This is the chilling effect of these sorts of things where people, what was his name? The guy who tried to expose Thunderfoot and his personal life, and they've done it again recently, to strike back at him in the real world because of things he said online. I am right now under embargo.
Yeah, there's a couple. Sorry, Hogtie.
Yeah, he's drawn 2 such attacks now where people have contacted his employer and that sort of thing. I mean, the Thunderfoot is quite well exposed, and I want to thank him publicly for sort of tipping me off to stop talking about my previous publications back when I was active in science, because of his experience with doing that sort of thing. So, boy, that's a real shame, Concordance, because I mean, you produce really good material, and the wealth of information that you can bring to bear because of your work life. It is a shame to hear you refer to that as a chilling effect that you, and sadly, I can't even argue with you because I agree with you, in part because it's happened to Thunderfoot twice, and he's got, it doesn't just go after creationists. He goes after a few other different people. But you've got like a broad range of crazy people that you draw to complain about your words on the internet. So I find it a real shame because you've taken on so many different topics. I find it a real shame to hear you refer to the chilling effect on your own content because it's pretty good stuff. Oh, sorry, real quick too. Who was it here? I forgot his name. I was just chatting with him on here. Midget Head mentions Miles Power has done some stuff on DNA and genetically modified stuff. And Miles Power, I think that's the guy that he's a friend of the show, and I was asking him about his bleach drinking video one time. Is that the guy I'm thinking of? Has he done DNA stuff? Because
my knowledge of Miles is that he did a wonderful series on 9/11, much better than my series. I know that he's done other stuff as well, and I will include a link to his channel in this video because I think he's absolutely wonderful.
I've asked you,
I'm a big
certainly,
fan of Miles.
overall, but yeah, great stuff. People are asking about the bleach drinking thing. Let's not venture into that. He did a thing where he was drinking bleach. It's got to do with homeopathy and dilution and that sort of thing. It was a great video, got a lot of attention. I have asked through the side chat if people are aware of, I mean, his channel itself is great, but if people are aware of specific videos he's made on the topic of genetic modification,
I'm certainly not
just
aware of those.
let us know. No, me neither. I don't.
No, he's actually not. He's not a geneticist or molecular biologist. He's much more of a chemist. I've had some calls with Miles, and we
make that sound as if
League
it's
of
a bad
Nerds.
thing.
No. But certainly he knows chemistry much better than he knows molecular biology. I'm trying to think of history of disease. James, and I can't remember James' last name at the moment, has done a lot of interesting pathology videos. The two of them together do League of Nerds. What is it called? Is it League of Nerds? Someone in comments will point to it, and it's a lot of fun. It's a podcast. It's like the only pod we've covered. GMO, paranoia, which all very good content. They've interviewed some interesting people, brought some people on, and I like their style in general. League of Nerds sounds.
I think
right.
it is League of Nerds you're thinking of. Yeah, I think it is League of Nerds you're thinking of. And now in the side chat, they're arguing about, not arguing about, but they're referring to what I thought was a hilarious exchange between those guys and SciShow. And I think SciShow does excellent content. I don't think we know any of them. Like, do we know Hank and his brother, whatever his brother's name is? They do great content too. The Green brothers. They just great content. But apparently they kind of stepped in it on the GMO thing. They made a video that Powers was kind of disagreeing with, and then I guess League of Nerds sort of took after SciShow in a Sharks versus Jets sort of like, it's a huge battle. But apparently the GMO, if you want to learn about GMOs, watch that exchange because it's brilliant.
Hank Green actually came out recently and sort of recanted, sort of took back some of the things he said, in light of the accurate science. Yeah. So I think that was good activism on their part. They actually did affect a change.
Yeah. No, I think I have a lot of respect for Hank Green. I sort of he said something wrong. The first indication that he said something wrong was him coming out and saying, "Yeah, I've had to study a little more on this, and here's what and he'll make an update video. He doesn't delete the old one like a creationist would.
Yeah.
He just came out and said this is what it was. I don't know them. Those are guys we should talk about getting on the show for a little chit chat. I don't know either of them. Not connected with them. I don't know if any of you guys are, but they're just the Green brothers are just so bright. Like,
yeah, let's see what we can do. But Concordance, I appreciate the fact that you struggle with the part 2 of why don't whales get more cancer.
It will come out. It can't come out before our collaboration with this group concludes. After it's concluded, then there won't be any problem.
Would you be prepared to sort of like do a video about how physically you can inject certain pieces of DNA, as we were discussing before? Is that something you could do without? It's a lot of work.
Come on, you do that.
But
you do that.
It would take the fun out of me because I can't talk about anything proprietary or that we're actively. I mean, I had a chat with my HR to make sure that I wasn't going to get fired over discussing science, which seems really crazy. One of the things you don't have in industry is academic freedom, right? I don't have the right in my private life to say whatever I want if it's related to work that I do for a living for my company. And the point is that it's sort of a don't rock the boat. If you get someone emailing or commenting or calling, you leave yourself very open just to them not wanting to deal with it. And even if it doesn't get me fired, which I totally can't afford to risk, I want this to be part of my private life and not part of my public life, which is why I will never disclose my real identity, my personal details. And it's why I feel so strongly about attempts to do that as a way of sort of striking back at people for stupid online debates that hurt no one. They try to make it hurt them in the real world. It's such a cheap, stupid tactic. And it's so obviously self-defeating because what happens? You don't get a voice in that discussion. And unfortunately, defensively, I've had to hold back from topics that I am incredibly passionate about because they overlap too much with what I do for a living. And CRISPR and talons and zinc fingers would all be, gene editing in general would be too close to what I do. It would probably not be permitted. Just a shame.
Yeah, I want to state. Yeah, it is a shame. I think that's terrible. I mean, I do what you can. Do what you can. Put up as much as you can that's sort of within the limits of safety for your personal life and for your employment, and let us know what you can about it. I'll do a video on how a sewing machine works. That's about even, isn't it? One's about as
sewing
complicated
machine
as the next.
Yeah.
Sure. No, it is. It is funny. I see
What I think I can say, because it's far enough away from what I do, but the potential for something like CRISPR is so limited by our ability to deliver that material. Just like you said, chop it up and jam it into the cell. It's really not that easy. And there's a whole field that has sprung up around delivering genes using the natural mechanisms for gene delivery, which are mostly viruses. So we're talking about giving people with cancer an HIV virus particle, but packaged with something that fixes the cancer. That's a very real thing. Measles as another one, because measles, it's got some nice profiles for its ability to infect a lot of different cells in your body. Adeno-associated virus and adenovirus, these are both sort of DNA packaging viruses. You can grow them up in yeast or in mammalian cells, and then you harvest. You measure them very carefully to make sure you don't give them too much. The problem is that they are still viruses. They're still a foreign particle. And if you start injecting that into people, there's potential that the body will react to the virally infected cells. And now you've got sort of systematic immune response that can be harmful or life-threatening. And there were a handful of cases where that did happen in the early days of gene therapy, where it led to a systemic response, anaphylaxis basically, that killed a couple of patients. And there's kind of been a general moratorium on viral delivered gene therapies. And that's something that's going to take a long time to rebuild. It's frustrating because there's so much potential for these things. What do you guys think about the idea of altering germline DNA so that we change what what genes exist in humans.
I'm horribly frightened by it. I had completely a knee-jerk reaction to it. I mean, even when people start talking about how this sort of thing can be useful in treating cancer, for example, I mean, I was trained in a tradition of cutting things out, irradiating them, using very aggressive chemotherapy focused on rapidly dividing cells, and you just think, well, it's a mess, but at least we know what those things do. I really don't feel I know enough about the processes or the consequences of the types of things you're talking about, whether it's gene therapy in people, whether it's manipulating embryos before implantation. I don't feel I know enough about those things to make what a person would call an informed choice. The only reaction I have to it is when other people immediately rail about, well, this is good or this is bad, when I know they don't know enough about it either. It's an alarming topic as far as I can tell.
What's really scary to me is...
Concordance, please.
Go ahead. So what really scares me is that no matter what ethical choice we make here in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, and I think those three groups are part of a community together that will probably make the ethical decisions together. Places like Japan and China don't have the same kind of links to our worldview and are going to be prepared to do things we will not. So it may not be a decision that you might say Western scientific community will make. There's good evidence that human cloning is already underway in Japan, for good or ill. I mean, maybe that will not have a major impact on our human health and human identity, but we're not going to get that choice. It really is a genie in bottle situation. Once it is out, there's really going to be very little we can do or say about it. No?
Oh, I agree with you. I don't. I think that the global situation, like the fact that different people, different cultures, different countries are, it's an ongoing problem. With fossil fuels and nuclear energy sources, like. It's an issue. We all have an impact on each other, but we can't sit here as a committee and decide how the Japanese or the Chinese are going to do things. I just don't know what to add to what you're saying, because all I can say is I find it very alarming. My oft repeated comment on the show.
Yeah, but that's because you're Canadian. What is it that you find frightening? Because I have to say that I'm really not that troubled.
I mean, you can imagine after a certain number of generations that whatever we've introduced becomes unstable and begins hopping in the great-grandchildren of anyone who received this therapeutic treatment, that it becomes, retro-transposon-like. I actually feel like CRISPR's a lot safer. Modern gene editing is a lot safer than previous techniques, which involved much larger pieces of DNA being jammed into the genome. They were a lot less stable then as well. But, something like this getting picked up via virus where people really don't have a choice whether or not they are transformed by whatever this mutation may be. These are really like long shot kind of scenarios. But the fact that they are possibilities, I think, is something that needs to be considered.
I hope our presentation is not being upset. I'm getting error messages that frames have been dropped and whatever. And I also note that we're coming up to the 2-hour mark. I'm happy to draw things, and again, just got another error message, drop frames detected and whatever. I'd love this conversation to carry on, but I'd also love people to join it if they want to. An after show for a brief period. Are you either of you up for that?
I probably have to close
I can just only briefly.
Soon. Okay. Well, in the chat, do people want to join? I'll join you on Skype for the last 5 minutes or so if you want. Otherwise, we'll draw it to a close. If you want to be on Skype, join us on Skype, let me know. But do it quickly. Yeah? People happy with that? There was one last thing that I wanted to touch upon. I subscribe to Answers in Genesis. Oh, hang on. Quantum Overlord wants to join. We'll get you on in a second, Quantum. But just whilst I do that, let's deal with this. Answers in Genesis. I'm subscribed to their emails, and I got one recently, like 2 days ago, I think, or yesterday, talking about Pluto and the wonderful situation where NASA had somehow sent this probe to Pluto, managed to marry up with it, take photos of it, and send them back over the most extraordinary distance. And what did Answers in Genesis have to say about it? The planet apparently looks very young. Therefore, this is a huge challenge, to the scientists who think that the solar system is 4.5 billion years old.
Well, clearly, yeah. I remember NASA saying that it looked like it was only 6,000 years old.
I honestly, I have to give a shout out to the Skeptic Fence show that sort of like touched upon this yesterday. If you're not familiar with Skeptic Fence, I'll include a link in the description. But yeah, I just wanted to slap Ken Ham when he was talking about this, and I don't know how you deal with this sort of idiocy. Ken Ham's idiocy. I mean, he was taken apart. In my view, of course, obviously it's a personal view. I think he was taken apart by Nye, the science guy, in their academic debate. Yes, but he just continues with this anti-scientific
on what basis
nonsense.
Yeah. On what basis when he says it appears young? What observation?
I shouldn't continue, but if I met him in person, I would really find it very difficult not to bitch slap the fucking. This is why
he's such a puzzle.
Go on.
I was just asking. On what basis does he say it's young? And as I was asking that question, George Saint had attached, had posted in the side chat there a link to it. What basis? So it's the craters. Okay. Yeah, it is interesting that there aren't craters. Very few craters. There's clearly uplift. We need someone who knows more about geology, or I guess is geology the wrong word for it? What do we call it when it's not Earth, but like geological processes just not happening on Earth? There's mountains on Pluto. That doesn't happen quickly. It is interesting that there aren't any. A lot of craters. It doesn't look like the moon. I mean, people expected Pluto to look like the moon. It doesn't look like the moon. Oh, so Quantum saying, yeah, it's because of the no craters thing. Yeah, we're about to have an interesting conversation. Maybe not here on the Magic Sandwich Show immediately. Maybe we'll find someone who knows more about this stuff to talk about it. But why are there no craters? Why doesn't Pluto look like the moon? We all thought there were going to be craters, but they're saying it's an active surface. And the fact that there are mountains, like tens of thousands of feet, 12,000 feet mountains on Pluto, means that it's not young. It means that there's uplift. So okay, the scientific community is going to have an interesting conversation, but that conversation's over for Ken Ham and everybody at AIG. They looked at it and went, yeah, that looks kind of young. I guess the Bible's right. End of investigation. Does anybody know what the story is here? Why does he say that?
Well, I was going to have a link, but sorry, let me just get rid of this.
Hey, real quick, DPR,
sure.
did you see that Ken Hovind was released? That
Yes.
He's headed home?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, yeah.
And did you see the picture
of him?
Yes, with him and the father from 18 and Counting.
Duggars.
What's the guy's
Yeah.
name?
Right.
Duggars.
Jim Bob Duggar.
Duggar father.
Yeah.
Jim Bob. There you go.
And in a Skype conversation, I said to someone, "Who do you think's reputation was worsened?
It was
by
more
that
damaged.
Right? Yeah. Right. And what's your answer to that?
I have no idea.
Duggar is associating himself with Hovind, a convicted criminal, or is Hovind's character, if it can be any worsened, is associating himself with someone that appears to have a, it's delicate, how do you put it? Has no problem with his son having relations with his daughters.
Yeah, I think it actually reflects worse on Hovind, right? I mean, Hovind, he's got his views
on that side too.
Yeah, and because it shows. Okay, so Hovind's got some anti-government views. He's got some anti-science views. But at the end of the day, his message is about salvation, the benefits of turning your life over to Christ, accepting Christ into your heart. But what is the actual message we're getting from these guys? The actual message we're getting is that if somebody in your in-group commits a crime or does something heinous or does something abusive or injurious to the psychology of young women, then that's okay. We protect those people as long as they give you a ride. They're good. Sure the guy's daughter or son may be molesting children, but he'll pick you up at the airport on time. Like that's the message.
Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you.
Yeah.
It kind of carries on. If you were to be photographed next to either of them, which is the one that you would choose to be photographed next to?
Oh, gotta be Ken Hovind.
I would
100 times.
Hovind, yeah.
I'd pay $20.
I'd love to meet Hovind.
Yeah.
I'd love to meet Hovind.
Me too.
I was going to call him and invite him to the Magic Sandwich Show. Actually,
that would be awesome.
Tell him we treated your son like gold. I told him your son was on. We treated him like gold.
Well, hey, that's a good idea. I'll send him a message. You two do it as well.
Offer to donate some money to his charity or his tax whatever relief for his lawyer.
No, I'm not going to go that far. But yeah, I imagine that poor Kent is in need of publicity. Let's see if we can get him on the show. Eric's
he's got to be super suspicious. I've corresponded with
he's a publicity whore. He's just out of prison.
He is. That's true.
Well, I'll send him a message and see whether we can get him on the show. Thumbs up if you think
that would be awesome.
Thumbs up in the chat if you think that we should try and get Kent as a guest on the show.
He has regular contact with a YouTuber, Lone Star 1776, which I think is a Texas type reference. I think the guy's from Texas.
Yeah.
Do you know him? Do you know him? I'm asking you like people ask Canadians. I know a guy in Toronto. Do you know him? Do you know who I'm talking about, Concordance?
No, no. I found his video when I was looking for Ken Hovind released videos. It was his.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they had regular contact while Hovind was in prison. I mean, a lot of people send messages to Kent Hovind while he was in prison, but this guy actually had two-way communication with him. And during the second, the 2015 trials, I was doing some videos and hangouts on how I think that evangelicals will misrepresent Hovind's legal problems, and I would set up a hangout with a Hovind supporter, and they just wouldn't show up for the hangout. Right? These guys are all good at beaking off in the comments and whatnot and saying, "Oh, they just put him in jail only for moving his own money." So, I'd have old hangouts on that topic. These guys wouldn't show up for it. So I just would take to inviting them. And I've written to that guy, Lone Star 1776, a couple of times, and he doesn't reply. Like, he's one of that guy in that I to I 35 or whatever his name is. I'm told they don't like even responding to messages. They're paranoid that you're trying to have a conversation with them, but they think you're trying to set them up or pull some sort of scam or whatever. I just find that in general they're really paranoid people and hard to get to reply. But we could write to Hovind directly. Why not?
Oh, yes, I will be. I think that's a great idea. I'll send both him and son a message. So we perhaps, hopefully, get both of them on. But I think it would be very interesting to see what approach Kent takes now. I think that he's the sort of person that will undoubtedly.
I'm curious too. I'm wondering if he goes back to
get back into the public eye, and whether he will continue with what are now seem to be somewhat outdated arguments that not even his own son is supporting, and whether he's going to adopt the approach that he had 10 years ago. I think that would be quite interesting to see. I've not has anyone seen anything that he's stated publicly since his release?
No.
I've not.
I watched his
anyone
first.
In the chat? We'll see. It's a few seconds delay. Anyone in the chat? Can hardly hear him. I'm sorry. I've got a microphone literally 2 inches away. I'm sorry. There's something wrong, and that needs to be addressed. But yeah, no one's heard any public statement from Kent.
He has been doing his own YouTube videos, and they're interesting. I saw his first one, and I was kind of interested because it's interesting to see somebody, like when you're experienced with YouTube as we are. I mean, obviously as consumers of YouTube content, but also producers, to see somebody sit down and be like, well, I've been in jail for 10 years, and this YouTube thing kind of happened while I was away. So, well, it's interesting, and it's kind of neat to see somebody who's sort of unfamiliar with it. But he's embracing that technology. I was curious watching it how much time he's going to spend. Like, is he ever going to watch the Why Do People Laugh at Creationists series? Is he going to see just how much meat was made of his material while he was away and YouTube really started to take off? YouTube has not been a good forum for him. But I also noticed that the very first thing he says is, he tells a story real quick. I've been a preacher or whatever, and he says, and I taught high school science for 15 years. Like, he hit the ground running for that first video with exactly all the same material. Every time you've ever seen him recorded doing a little community church presentation, his first YouTube video is him hitting the ground running with that same material. So we'll have to see how or if it changes at all once he gets his feet wet on YouTube.
We're up to the 2-hour mark. I'm minded to close the program.
I am just discovering the fact
that
he has a new one. Yeah, maybe we should put the link up for his new page. I didn't realize he had his own page now.
Neither did I.
Oh, you're not asking me for it. I'd have to look for it, but
someone can put that
people.
up.
Yeah, it pops up on my Google Plus feed. Yeah, I rarely go looking for videos anymore. Everything I watch is something people send to me, or it shows up in my Google Plus feed. I've been a lazy consumer in the last few months. Sorry, DPR, you were going to say.
No, on that note, let's bring. Hang on, let me get closer to the mic. Let's bring this show to a close. And if people are interested in an after show, send me a Skype contact request on. Or to Magic Sandwich Show, and we'll see where we get to. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I don't know what has happened to the live broadcast on YouTube, whether that worked at all. Time will tell, but we'll be with you again in 2 weeks' time, and I have to now stop broadcasts. Yeah, you have stopped streaming. Yeah. Would you like to stop? Yes, yes. Okay, that's YouTube done.